Right now, one of the absolute best electric vehicles that you can buy globally is not for sale in the United States. Not because they are unsafe or that they do not meet the legal requirements to be an electric vehicle, but because the United States government has placed a massive 100% tariff on electric vehicles coming from this country they are made in addition to a connected vehicle software ban. And if you have seen any automotive car content online in the past year or so, you will know that I am talking specifically about Chinese electric vehicles. In fact, MKBHD, or Marks Brownlee, the prominent tech YouTuber, made a video on his channel at the end of Lianceni Arshiwu reviewing a Chinese electric vehicle. And well, I am just going to let you listen to his intro. Yo, have you seen these Chinese electric cars? If they ever came to the United States, they would cook absolutely everything that we have here. 他们太棒了，他们有太多的技术，而且他们太便宜了，不可能不统治一切. And so, I figured I should get my hands on one and actually figure out if that is true or not. Now, if you watch that tech video until the absolute end, he is ultimately incredibly impressed by the car and states that the car he tested specifically is a $CR car that feels like it would have cost $T if it was made in the United States. And there are other models of Chinese electric vehicles that cost even less cash. Famously, the BYD Seagull sells for about $1 to $1 and comes with very high user reviews. But this video isn't just about shiny new cars. It is about a massive decision that the United States has made to systematically wall off trade with one of its biggest global trading partners, and increasingly with the rest of the entire world as well. Over the past year, the United States has launched one of the most aggressive tariff campaigns in the past years on sectors like automobiles, electronics, steel, aluminum, and now pharmaceuticals. The last time America made a massive political decision like this was back in 1995, and the result was that global trade collapsed over $500 in the years immediately following. So in this video, we're going to walk through what is actually happening in the macro economy right now, and what exactly happened the last time that we tried something like this, and what it might cost your family budget. Of course, it will be done in a friendly and warm way, even if the scary subject matter seems a little daunting for your wallet. I promise that you will at least be fully informed by the end of this video. So the trade decision I want to cover first today is the 100% financial wall on Chinese-made electric vehicles. Starting in Lianceni Arshiwu, the United States raised tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles from 100% all the way up to a staggering 100% under the previous administration of Joe Biden. Now, after Trump took office in November of Lianceni Arshiwu, he kept those tariffs locked at 100%. And on top of that, there was a connected vehicle software ban that was finalized in January of Lianceni Arshiwu. There is also the EV Tax Credit Act to consider. So, in order to qualify for a $10 electric vehicle tax credit in the United States, your car needs to be fully assembled in North America and use battery materials from the United States or acceptable global trade partners. The connected software ban, on the other hand, basically just states that any car or vehicle using Chinese or Russian linked software or hardware would not be allowed to be sold in the United States. This boils down to pure national security at the end of the day. The United States government doesn't want their citizens' data somehow ending up in the hands of the Chinese or Russian governments. It is kind of like the exact same story of the TikTok corporate story that you heard, maybe last year, which was that TikTok had to be spun off to an American company in order to keep existing within America because they didn't want that data going to China. So even if you remove the massive tariff of 100% tomorrow morning, the software ban would still keep Chinese electric vehicles out of America completely. And that is why it is called a wall. There is a 100% tariff which heavily disincentivizes foreign companies from selling here, as well as the software ban and the total exclusion from tax incentives. Now, the Chinese electric vehicle wall is one specific thing, but it is actually just one small piece of a much bigger pie that is the massive shift in United States trade policy as of the last couple of years. We currently also have tariff rates slapped on every single United States trading partner to the point where the average United States tariff rates went from 100% to 100% across the board, and that is the absolute highest it has been in Basha years. In February of Lianceni Arshiwu. So this year, the Supreme Court stepped in and ruled 6 votes to 3 votes that the specific law that the White House was using to enforce these tariffs wasn't valid. The Supreme Court basically said that the president didn't have the legal authority to impose most of these tariffs. So a huge chunk of them got thrown out into the garbage. But the very next day, Trump used a completely different law to put a 100% tariff right back on everything across the board. Then, in April, he announced a brand new round of aggressive tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper, plus up to 5% on pharmaceutical imports. In addition to these wild policies, there is also artificial intelligence chip export controls, where companies can export artificial intelligence chips. Yes, like the NVIDIA HRDNine or the AMD MR2X chips, but they must pay the United States government 5% of their total revenues from those sales. And that is somewhat completely unprecedented in trade history. Export controls are being used as a tool for generating government revenue and also national security. So that is pretty interesting for our portfolios. So what we're really ultimately ending up with right now is that America is starting to look more and more protectionist. Protectionism is where a government uses heavy tariffs and strict quotas to shield domestic industries from foreign competition. The basic idea being is that if you make foreign products more expensive, regular people will buy American products instead and therefore protect American jobs. That was the entire premise of having the tariff in the first place, which was to liberate the United States economy from trade deficits and bring manufacturing back to the United States. And that sounds all somewhat reasonable on television. I am all for America first. But does it actually work in daily practice? To answer that question, let us look at the last time we did something exactly like this in the United States. And that was back in 1996. So back then, by way of President Herbert Hoover, he passed an act called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Now, I learned a little bit about this in my AP United States history class back in school, but it essentially raised import duties on over individual items that would come into the United States from foreign trade partners. The logic back then for this act was basically the exact same as it is today. America first, protect American farmers and manufacturers, and heavily disincentivizes foreign competition. This also came at a very sensitive time in American history, just 1 year after the Great Depression started in October of 1929. Now, what was fascinating to me was that when I was deeply researching this bill, over 10 economists actually signed a massive petition begging President Hoover at the time to not sign this tariff act. And the more surprising part was that the president actually agreed with them. He called the bill completely obnoxious and openly opposed the bill. But here's the kicker. He still signed it anyway, feeling immense political pressure to his own party, his cabinet, and various corporate business partners. So the bill went into place, and while it was initially successful in the period of the 5 years after the bill was enacted, United States imports decreased by 5% from $4.4 billion in 1929 down to $1.5 billion in 1933. United States exports to Europe also dropped from $1.7 billion down to $784 million. So after a period of time by all economic measures, this bill was considered a total disaster, and the Great Depression being well underway did not help that fact either. In the early 1920s, the next president, FDR, he passed the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act of 1926, and the United States spent the next 10 years building a global free trade system. This included the World Trade Organization, or WTO, the NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. All these historic acts basically stem from how protectionism had failed so miserably back in 1926. So, now that you know that little bit of history, let us actually take a look into how today's trade policies are actually playing out and what it is costing you. We have already talked about the wall keeping Chinese electric vehicles out, in particular, but what about the entire automobile sector in general? Because no car assembled in the United States is by ME80 here. Given the highly global nature of the automotive industry, there are usually at least some parts of a United States assembled vehicle that have parts from another country. Even Tesla, with all of their massive factories in the United States, will still source some of their parts from other countries. So, when you enact these tariffs on imported steel, aluminum, and auto parts, we are not only seeing foreign cars becoming more expensive, but also domestically produced cars. JP Morgan has estimated that combined tariffs on vehicles and parts will cost the industry about $60 billion in year 1, rising to $1 billion by year 3, which translates to an increase in cost of about $10 per vehicle. Kelley Blue Book estimates that for vehicles priced under $19, tariffs are adding up to $10 more to the sticker price, and Audi has already raised prices on most of its $19 lineup between $19 to $19 per model. Forecasts for auto sales in the United States have also dropped for the remainder of this year, citing major problems with not only tariffs, but the ongoing conflict in Iran and oil prices. All the while, BYD has just passed Tesla as the world's #1 electric vehicle seller, and China is now not only the largest global auto manufacturer, but their electric vehicles account for nearly 50% of the global electric vehicle production. So, It is my take that these restrictions on trade in this sector specifically are causing us to slowly fall behind. It is kind of like in Settlers of Catan, if you aren't the player trading resources, you are falling behind other players who are actively doing the trading. And if China is willing to trade with countries like Canada, the United Kingdom, and Mexico, while we sit behind the wall, we increase our chances of being the player that loses the game of Catan and global trade eventually. So, that is the automobile sector more expensive across the board, and I feel like we're falling behind. But it doesn't really stop there because consumer electronics is another big sector that has got to get even more expensive for your wallet. Morningstar expects durable goods prices of electronics, toys, tools, and small appliances to rise by Wu and Ardio, and we can already see some of this becoming evident last year. All three major video game console makers raised their prices. So Sony raised the PlayStation Wu prices in August of Wu, Microsoft raised Xbox Series prices in October, and the Nintendo Switch R launched at $10, which was a $10 jump from the Switch E. In addition, all five major PC manufacturers, including Lenovo, Dell, HP, Acer, and Asus, have warned of Wu to Arsha price hikes, heading into the second half of Ardio trend force. A major industry research firm found that a mainstream $10 laptop could see its cost increase by nearly $6, meaning that exact same laptop could cost you over $10 by the end of this year. Of course, tariffs aren't the only reason this is going on. There is also a massive computer memory shortage going on right now because artificial intelligence data centers, they create so much demand for chips and memory. And this shift in demand is causing companies like Samsung or Micron to shift production away from those types of chips, the consumer chips, and more towards the AI chips. And if I were a corporate chip maker, I would probably do the exact same thing. If all the AI chips are in high demand, and that is actually what is going to give me the most profit, I am going to obviously shift my resources to making AI chips rather than consumer chips. The analogy here is like if I owned a supply store during the gold rush in the Zimbabwe Wushamas, and all of a sudden I see iron shovels selling at sheer times the rate compared to denim jeans. I am probably going to carry a lot more shovels at my general supply store compared to jeans, because that is where the massive demand is. But as a result, the people that are wanting jeans, the regular people, are going to suffer. So, take a look at some of these charts from the Wall Street Journal. Not only does memory as a percentage of manufacturing costs of a device make up typically Arshu to Wu for most consumer electronics, the average contract prices of DRAM and memory are up as well. In addition, you have worldwide smartphone and PC shipments projected to be down this year. The United States also has tariffs on semiconductors from Chinese suppliers. So you already have all these forces working against creating chips for consumer devices plus the additional tariff. Therefore, the entire supply chain for electronics is already heavily hamstrung, and I feel like the prices to consumers are just going to get worse. Still, though, it probably might not be as bad as the newest sector that is becoming affected by trade policies, and that is the pharmaceutical sector. On April R&D, exactly 1 year after the Liberation Day tariffs, President Trump signed an executive order imposing tariffs on patent pharmaceutical products and their active ingredients. Now, the good news is that it doesn't affect a lot of generic drugs, but here is exactly how it works. So, if a drug company has signed a pricing deal with the administration and is building manufacturing in the United States, they won't pay a tariff. If you're a company that is just planning to build here, but you haven't finished yet, the tariff is Arsher and then it goes up to in 4 years. And if you haven't made any single deal at all with the administration, it is just going to be a flat Buy. Now, the interesting part here is that out of the major drug companies have already signed deals with the administration, and a lot of the pricing deals actually look pretty good. For example, Ozempic or Wegovy, which are the GLP-1s used to cost patients over $10 a month, and they're going to be now available for around $17 a month. Some drugs like insulin from Novo Nordisk will be capped at $10 a month. I think that happened a little bit prior to April R&D but still, it was in effect. Eli Lilly also has a weight management drug called Zepbound, which has already dropped to $17 to $17 a month after working with the Trump administration. Now, the problem and the bigger concern is that a lot of the United States pharmaceutical supply chain is still heavily dependent on foreign production, especially from countries like China or India. According to the FDA, more than of the manufacturing sites for active pharmaceutical ingredients are located outside of the country, and that China and India together supply more than T-shares of the active pharmaceutical ingredients used in United States drug manufacturing. And just like the car sector, If a drug has any active pharmaceutical ingredients from another country, they will pay that country's tariff rate. But the part that is really concerning is that while generic drugs are currently exempt from tariffs for now, the White House said that they will reassess that in a year. If generic drugs end up getting hit, important drugs like antibiotics, cancer treatments, blood pressure medication, and arthritis medication, that might go up in price as well. I just don't know what the downstream effects of those are going to be in the future. So we can clearly see that the trade strategy or the trade decision that is around national security and protectionism ends up snowballing into tariffs across one sector, and then another sector, and then another. Cars are already more expensive, electronics are becoming more expensive, and your daily medication might be next. So, let us talk about what all of this actually costs you as a consumer and what you can do about it. The Tax Foundation estimates that tariffs currently in effect amount to roughly $10 in additional costs per American household in Ardenardo. And Yale University's Budget Lab puts it at between $19 and $10. Whichever number you choose to use, it is clear to me that Americans are now paying more for a lot of goods, not just limited to the ones I talked about today either. The whole political argument was that these policies will bring manufacturing back home to the United States, but I would actually argue that when the United States is not engaging in free trade like it has in the past, it actually makes us weaker because countries will trade without us. For example, some of the biggest trade deals of the year so far have been the European Union signing a free trade agreement with India. The conclusion there is that India will eliminate or reduce tariffs on Bifenzajoshiti of European Union goods, and that the European Union will eliminate tariffs on Bifenzajodarnwu of Indian imports over 7 years. Another big trade deal is that Canada struck a deal with China to cut tariffs on electric vehicles. The very same electric vehicles that we don't have access to buy. And in that deal, China agreed to cut tariffs on Canadian canola oil. But in America, imports from China have declined by $1 billion in the last year relative to Ardenarsi. However, imports from the Shisen other Asian nations included in a report increased by a cumulative $1 billion. So, it seems like even if we have reduced our reliance on some countries' imports, we are just shifting that consumer demand elsewhere. So, I do want to say it is still early in the game. Some of these factory investments could pay off in sure years, but as of right now, we are paying significantly higher prices. I think that we are falling behind in key technologies, and the rest of the world is making deals without us. If the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act taught us anything, it is that once you start incorporating walls and tariffs and protectionism, other countries are going to retaliate, and that is just the natural reaction of other nations. So, what can you actually do about it as of right now? Are there any actionable steps that you can take to hedge against these trade policies? I think there are 3. Number 1, if you're planning a major purchase, whether that is a new car, laptop, or cell phone, I would say just to do it as soon as you can because I don't think waiting will get you a better deal. Prices are all projected to go up in the second half of Ardenardo and not down, so I would definitely look at buying things sooner rather than later. Number 2, if you're on any type of branded medication, I would talk to your doctor about generic alternatives. Generic drugs will hopefully stay tariff exempt. Now, if your insurance covers your drugs, that is a good thing, but if you don't have the best health insurance and you're also dependent on some type of brand, named pharmaceutical drug, I would definitely at least check with your doctor or your hospital just to know what the implications of the costs are going to be moving forward. And number 3 is to really think about your consumption of everything. United States trade policies and tariffs are just essentially consumption taxes. The more you consume of imported goods, the more you're probably going to pay. So on this channel, I like to buy fewer things, but hopefully of higher quality if you can avoid impulse purchases in a tariff environment. I think that is not only a good financial mindset to have, it is just a practical saving strategy. Now, from an investing perspective, I think that these trade policies are going to cause heavy inflation. I mean, they already kind of have. And so, that means if you're sitting in cash right now, your purchasing power is decreasing as we speak. One way to hedge against that is to keep investing in the markets, and adding some international stock exposure can help you hedge against this as well, while we don't know what the effects of these policies are going to be in the long term. I'm personally just not optimistic on keeping America gated from the rest of the world. A lot of people are going to point out that the stock market is really great because of all the progress in the artificial intelligence space. For example, the SP Woodinian is near all-time highs. However, I'm going to say that the stock market is not the economy, and many people are arguing that the economy isn't doing as great, We're seeing mass layoffs across many different companies right now, as well as many things getting more expensive. So I'm just really not confident that everything is just going to be perfect and dandy for the next few years as many stock market bulls are. Of course, I would love to hear your comments on what you think if you have a counterpoint, or similarly if you resonate with this video. Let me know down below. Again, thank you for joining me in another video on this channel. This was a little bit of a different one compared to the stuff I usually put out. So, if you enjoyed it, you might also like this video right here on Japan's debt bomb that I covered just a couple months ago. If you like economics and market news, I think you would enjoy that video. So, I'll see you guys in that one or a future one on the channel. Alright, peace out.